And if you missed also the top of the hour with our paper review, we shall show you much of that in the course of a program. But of course, also you can see there's a flip chart behind me. We shall be using this flip chart also to crunch the numbers to see who is leading where when it comes to also the presidential candidates, who has a headset now that we know the campaigns have begun in earnest. But looking at the front page of the Daily Nation from my laptop, Uhuru cleared calls for peace is what is on the front page of the Daily Nation this morning. As you can see it over there, I will just try and also enlarge that so that you can see it clearly. And this is today's daily. According, there you go. It says, crowded field as 8 candidates receive IBC approval to run for top office. President gets all important certificates to seek re-election on Jubilee Party and immediately fires salvo against NASA, which he says has neither the capacity for the pedigree to govern. That is what we have on the front page of the Daily Nation today. So, Miguna, you think, or let's begin with Josh, you think NASA don't have the pedigree to govern, according to what the president is saying?
Not at all. I don't agree, because all of them have been leadership. If there's one debate that both coalitions have failed to win over, is what's different. The two of them have similarity.
Yes.
In fact, I think that narrative that who can govern, who cannot, all of them have in government. You know, it's an irony that between 2003 and 2012, all these guys at some point they're in government. From 2008 to 2012, all of them were in government. So I feel that one is not be the basis. Then secondly, maybe just quickly to pick out something, I think my good panelist, Honorable Jeremiah Kioni, talked about that the difference of this campaign would be the issue of action-oriented versus propaganda. And I think if there's one thing that Jubilee will hang on, will be on that one. In this case, it will hang them. Why am I saying that? Anytime you're an incumbency, it's a question of what you have done. It is 100% what you have done. And it is very difficult to tell a voter something different from what they see. And I think there's one thing that Jubilee kind of failed. If you look at 2012, they were heavy on PR, pomp, glamour, and you know, you could see the sense of energy, you could see the sense of urgency. There was some newness that they came with, and you know, they came in with a lot of negativity. So there was that benefit of doubt. So if you were to talk about those issues, I pick out, for example, if you talk about what they went for the high capital kind of projects, which are kind of, you know, they are done once in a lifetime, like the SGR. But again, it hits them back as to how they did it.
Yes.
How much money was spent on it? How was it executed? It kind of even draws away the 100% publicity they would have got out of it. Because for SGR, if they're to make it an agenda, it's a positive, it's a plus, they did it. Because it's a big project. It has not been done for 100 years. But again, if opposition comes back and says, okay, let's unpack it. Yes. Let us see how the SGR was implemented and executed. Again, it begins to stink. And in fact, it goes to their main Achilles heels for this administration. Corruption and mega sleaze. How was the project done vis-a-vis the cost implication? They lose their... In fact, they will lose their debate on that. If you talk about, for example, again, the idea of doing these capital-intensive projects, look at the debt burden that has saddled the country. And, you know, it touches on the basics. When we have a third of our, for example, revenue going to debt repayment, and you have in 4 years, like, our amount of debt tripling, and that affects basics, because I feel Jubilee neglected the production sectors of the economy. Right. If we cannot be food secure, you know, there's nothing you can tell the voter at the rural. If you go, for example, to somewhere like Western Kenya and tell them that we've done SGR, number one, SGR is hitting in Nairobi by 2017. So it hasn't gone to the hinterlands of the western side. In the western side, if, for example, the current problem would be food crisis, how do you campaign on SGR? How do you tell the voters, we have delivered SGR, but the basics, we can't do it? And importantly, I think the question of corruption will be their biggest problem. Because I remember in 2013, they were so heavy on that never again shall we procure things that are grossly exaggerated things. But again, that has hit them hard, to the extent that you've seen them not talking about that. They are no longer saying it's an achievement or what. So I think at the end of the day, it is a question, in fact, it will be more or less like a referendum on the government, more than what the opposition offers. That will be the key question. As to how they package and answer that, that is what will dictate their win or lose.
Okay. And you mentioned also the domestic or the debt level of this country, and that has been carried out also with or is on the front page of a Business Daily today, and maybe we can ask Senator Wamatangi to respond to this as a sidebar story there. It says domestic debt hits 2 trillion shillings end of May. Kenya's gross domestic debt has crossed the 2 trillion shillings mark, indicating the government's high appetite for debt to finance the national budget. The latest weekly data released by Central Bank of Kenya shows the stock of local debt, including treasury bills and bonds, stood at 2.008 trillion shillings as at May the 19th, an increase of about 65 billion shillings since the figure was last made public in March. And now this is just a local debt. We've not even now put the external debt as well, which has crossed over now to 4 trillion shillings. Senator Wamatangi, you think the government is doing well? Or do you think this is sustainable?
Debarl, let me start by first responding and acknowledging one or two things said by my colleagues, starting with Joshua here, my very good friend. But I think to a larger extent of his time, he's been listening a lot to the NASA line. to an extent that he's starting to believe a lot of them. But and you see that is the problem sometimes when a lie is told many times over.
Maybe he has to defaultly take that position because we don't have NASA representatives here today.
I can help Joshua, to debunk most of these things, because
I think the facts speak for
one thing that Joshua is right about is that indeed, in an election like this, when you're an incumbent, you cannot help it. The rule, the policy, the way things are is that it will be a referendum on you. You will have to be scrutinized against the things you have done and against the things you've said you would do. That one you have right. Now, why you have it wrong is on the actuals, what has actually been done. Now, let's begin from that point that you made about the grand projects implemented. But what, and that's why I said I think you've been listening a lot to NASA, because the narrative that Jubilee has concentrated on the big projects, ignoring the common ground is completely wrong. It's actually a lie. I'll tell you why. What Jubilee did was to implement all at the same time, knowing that it is all their duty. One, on the projects, for example, SGR, it's now on the day after tomorrow. We are coming up with this, and with a train to Nairobi, and Debarl, you're also invited. Welcome. There will be no AM live, and also Miguna.
We can do it from the train.
So the SGR is being complete. But remember, when all these other projects are going on, all the infrastructure projects from SGR to the roads to the port expansion and so on, the basics that they forget to mention, or they intentionally refuse to mention, are, for example, what has happened in the education sector. I mean, we've said it before. Right. Look at, let me finish.
I think we shall dedicate maybe even next week to try and see the manifesto.
But because Joshua had his time, Joshua had his time to put that, let me put it across.
But I'm pressing for specific. My question was on the debt,
what has happened, for
domestic
example.
debt.
Yes, sure. I'll deal with that. But look at what has happened, for example, in education. There's free education. Look at what has happened in the medical field. We have given free medical treatment to mothers and so on. Look at what has happened even in the food security area itself. And I want us to not to ride on this latest modern lie by ignoring the fact that we are coming from a drought that we discussed here about, and the mitigating grounds that we talked about. And I don't want to reopen that debate. But even on the basics, look at what has happened to connectivity, connecting our most poor people to power. I mean, those are down on the ground issues. We do not refuse that. And then, I was saying that to help Joshua look at both sides. But even if you look at what you are now focusing on domestic debt having risen to 2 trillion, Debarl, we cannot have that short of a memory to forget the realities of the last 10 years and actually 15 years before. The policy before Jubilee came into power was local internal borrowing. That was the policy. That is why it was never talked about. And that is why every day, if you remember, close out the few years Jubilee has been in power, the 4.5, and remember those other years, every day you would wake up with a headline in this newspaper saying the dollar today is at 140, today is at 89. Tomorrow, I mean, you could not sustain the inflation, fluctuation of currency was unbearable. The profits that were being made by banks. Let me finish. Let me finish the ball, because that's the topic you have brought on domestic debt. The amounts that were being borrowed from central bank, the biggest investment that time was in treasury bills and treasury bonds, because government was the biggest borrower at that particular time. Now that policy was changed. It was changed because inflation is not good for the economy. It is not good for the people. And I want to tell Joshua and those who think in that mentality, indeed, if that is the policy that was pursued, now the cost of living would have been unbearable. Now that particular strategy changed to external borrowing, and you see
where is this 2 trillion really arising domestically?
The simple policy about investment all the time when you borrow externally is one: are you borrowing to invest in viable projects?
All right.
Will they pay in the long term? And if you look at when this money borrowed is invested, the only problem we have is because when the money is borrowed and invested in projects that will pay off in the near future.
Thank you.
People expect the payout to come tomorrow morning. What we have to do is to be honest and tell the people that these are potentially good projects for the economy.
We have had Honorable Wamatangi, but one thing I would like to say as a preface, some of us are here for the country. We are not here for Jubilee. We are not here for NASA.
So are we.
We are not here. So some of us just want to face the facts as they are.
Yes.
Not the facts as we want them to be, or the way we want to twist them. One thing why I respect Honorable Kioni, even when I was in ODM and he was in PNU, is that we don't disagree on facts. We may disagree on our interpretation of facts. But Jeremiah Kioni will not change facts. So I don't want us to change facts. Coming back to your question, the headline says, Uhuru cleared calls for peace and unity. Then there is something about capacity and pedigree.
Yes.
So number one, yes, it is good that he called for peace and unity. So we must be able to say what is good when somebody does something good. So the president called for peace and unity. He called for peace among all the contestants, for all the political parties. He called for peace in Kenya.
Yes.
And he said, let's unite so that when we go for this democratic contest, no matter what our differences are, let's make sure we have Kenya as a peaceful and united country. Because without those two, we can't go anywhere. We can't transform the country. So that was good for the president. And I think all the candidates and all the parties and independents must call for peace and unity. Then the second thing that he did, he said capacity. I would hope that he would have just ended there. That distinguish what your capacity is vis-a-vis your opponents. So we would have asked, for example, how is President Uhuru Kenyatta better than Dr. Uhuru Okot, for example, in terms of qualifications, in terms of integrity, in terms of vision, in terms of manifesto, policies and programs. This is where the debate should be, but not pedigree. Pedigree is biology. Is the fact that Uhuru Kenyatta was the son of Jomo Kenyatta, the former president, and Raila Odinga is the son of Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. That does not give anybody any qualification or capacity for anything.
Yes.
So if the president had just ended on capacity, had talked about peace, unity, then talked about what Jubilee has done or not done, and the reason why he deserves 5 more years, I would have given him A+. But the moment he brought pedigree, he became provincial, he became primordial. He then diluted and contaminated his message with a primitive message.
But
we are going... No, let me just finish. We allowed you. We allowed you.
In which statement did he bring in pedigree?
My friend.
You know, there's a difference between what the paper says and what he said.
Yes, so let me just finish. If the paper misrepresented President Uhuru Kenyatta, then of course he should take it with the paper. And Honorable Wamatangi, I know our media is petty and shallow and mediocre, so they can make that mistake. But if they did not make the mistake, we are assuming, because you did not challenge it initially when you're speaking.
No, it is
So if in fact,
but no,
if the
can
media
I ask you a
was
question?
correct,
But because this is a matter of semantics that we have here that we're
No, it's not
discussing.
semantics,
No, just
it's
a
very
moment.
important.
Just a moment. Because
Yes.
if you take a pedigree and you say
Yes.
we don't know if you're actually taking it out of context and using it as a pretext.
It cannot be. No.
So we cannot solely put the word pedigree to and peg it also with just biology.
Debarl,
right?
Debarl, words mean something. Of course, first of all, in terms of what they are, and in terms of the context in which they are used. If in a political contest, in an election, you use the word pedigree, it can only mean biology.
Okay.
But I don't want us to run away from that. No, let me say this.
But I think we're going off the rails with this. Now we're getting into an English class, which is not really...
Though.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
But let me bring it home, because I think this is important.
Yeah, but on the context that it is not said by him.
No, let me say this. For 55 years, Kenyans have been bombarded with misleading information about people being born leaders. That God creates leaders. God does not create leaders. God creates all human beings, and human beings must then exhibit and demonstrate their abilities within the environment in which they are.
All right.
So there is nobody who was born a leader, and nobody should say they are entitled to leadership because of where they were born. So that one I want to debunk without equivocation.
Right. It is so the question is, that's what the paper said.
And I think, yes.
That's precisely what the newspaper said. So, yeah, sure.
Good. Jeremiah, but I think we are turning our focus on this external debt, the domestic debt. That's where we were before.
You brought this.
Yes. When we also discussed that as well.
1, 2, 3 things. One is that this issue of borrowing.
Yes.
I think the most important thing is not the amount of money that we have borrowed, is whether we are within the acceptable limits. And we have institutions that continue guiding us and telling us whether we are still within the acceptable limits, accepted world over for borrowing. And I'm told, and I have read this, that World Bank still says we are within the acceptable limits. IMF, I think, has said as much. If I'm wrong,
they gave, a month ago they gave a warning.
Yeah,
IMF, World Bank said no.
Yes,
they will give a warning so that we don't go beyond. But I don't think we are beyond.
No,
but also,
they get on the red line.
That we're teetering, yeah, because
on the brink.
I wish you could allow me to just finish, so that even if we are
teetering with a statement which is not correct right now on public television.
Sorry?
We cannot let you fly with a statement which is
but
not
I'm saying this, and
television.
I am starting with it, that if we are still within the acceptable limits, or even if we are within, we may be teetering towards that, but the borrowing that we have done will help us. Remember, the amount of borrowing that NASA would want to project, like we have done in Tongri, is because we have borrowed to do the SGR. And SGR, we are told it is not going to have immediate results. Yet, we are told that moving from Nairobi from the day after tomorrow, it's 4 hours on a train, or that kind of thing.
Okay.
And but I wanted to say this.
Let's not go into the mechanics of it. I just want us to just get the idea that we are actually
But
seeking...
Let me do this.
You cannot restrict people's ability
again,
to
you can't put us like we are in a classroom.
Yeah.
Allow us to some level of debate. Because if you continue doing this, eventually we will now listen to you as opposed to...
Yes.
But I wanted to say this. For as long as our borrowing is not outside the limit. And remember, even during Kibaki's time, we were being told you're overborrowing, you're overborrowing. So this thing of being told overborrowing, we have had it over the time. As a government, we must be careful never to overborrow, because that has its own negative effects. But the amount of money that has been borrowed, we can see where it has been put, and we are certain that it will bear fruit in the long run. If when you look at even this headline and the numbers that we will come to, there is something that I want to say about this word pedigree. I have known the president for a while. We worked with him for a while. He is not the person who keeps going back to where he came from and his parents and that they were president of this country. That is not his nature. So it's likely that this is a word, and I was looking for it to see whether it was a figurative word, but it is a word that has been chosen to describe what he said, and I think it is not the correct word that should have been used on him. He is not the one who, that is not his nature. He's not the one to brag about his background and perhaps what he has. That I can vouch for him. But look at this statement. We'll accept the outcome of August vote, says Uhuru and Ruto, as they get IEBC note. As we are looking at these headlines, this is one of the most important statements that we want to hear from all the other 7 presidential contenders. It is a very useful thing. And I can tell you that as Kenyans, there is some element of fear that when we don't hear it from others. Those who are saying we're not even going, NASA are saying they are not even going to challenge the results in court. They are likely to do other things. And those are things that we need to be very careful about. So even as we are going towards the numbers, because I really want us to look at the numbers,
yes,
as you said,
yes,
it is important to pay attention to some of those things. And again, we can talk too much about many things. We know the government has achieved, and it has a track record. They will be hit on, that is what NASA will be trying to do. Saying you have not achieved, this has not worked, that has not worked.
Yes.
It's a question of who is believable going forward. Some of these individuals in NASA, we have listened to them for all the time we've been young and even joined politics. And there isn't much that you can believe in them, because they have said, they have always been they are on record as just criticizing for life. And that is where I think the major game will be. Who is believable? I am happy to listen to the president and his deputy saying of what they have achieved and what they are going to achieve.
Yes.
As even from your paper, I can see what has the tarmacking of this Rungarunga Road. The president was there last week, and it has started.
Thank you.
One of the things, Debarl, that you must take from us, and especially those of us who are campaigning on the ground, there is a question of who can we believe. And I want to tell you, even the people outside the Jubilee zones, we know, they know when they say they can do it, they will do it. As opposed to people who just want to say it cannot be done. And that is where this game will be won. We have achieved something, we can trust you to achieve something more.
Thank you. Let's hear from Joshua Kiptoo. And,
a quick one just
yes,
on the debt. I think we will be getting it wrong if we say that we are within the right margins. I don't know if we forget in 2015, the Budget Allocation Committee, and there's that, I think, if I'm to be correct, the committee that sets the economic agenda in Parliament, they normally get policy briefs from a team of economists. Do you remember that time they really had pressed the MPs not to raise the debt ceiling? That was in 2015. They really pressed them. They pressed them. And if you remember at first instance, the same committee led by Mutava at first refused to raise that debt ceiling for the finance ministry. And they came back for the second time. That was 2015. So you can't tell me from 2015 up to now, we are still on the right. World Bank and IMF for 2 years, they kept entertaining and saying we are within the limits, we are within the limits. If we don't hit the 50% GDP, I'm not an economist, but it is just facts that speak for themselves. Why should we compare ourselves, for example, with the US and say that the US borrowing compared to ours, we're even doing well, them they can do up to 100%. Look at the size of the economies, they're different. And it's just pure business. If you are doing business based on debt, and the same returns, and they have said well that
yes,
the nature of the projects we do are not things that can come or they can bring back returns tomorrow. It's a 20-year, 25-year-old. How then do you expect to do all that in debt, still manage to also have the production sectors of economy? Why then would we have the issues of the food production being a problem? I can even pick a few things. The problem also is if we take the money and we say as a country want to invest, question is, are we getting value for money? I'll just pick one project that again falls on the face. Look at Galana-Kulalu project. How much money we put in? As late as last week, there were statistics showing that up to 15 billion had been put on the same. If you look at the whole idea, the feasibility study of that project in 2013, trust me, Debarl, if the 15 billion had gone into what it was meant for, right now we wouldn't have an issue of importation. That's why I think if there's one thing Jubilee will get it wrong, is if they proceed on and just keep yapping about these policies, yet you have the people who sit there, who watch, who in fact look at the basics. In fact, I think they will have a very difficulty getting out their own supporters to come out voting because there is that deflation. I come from Rift Valley, and Rift Valley's mainstay is agriculture. If the same farmers cannot sell and they see importation, do you think you'll get them excited about coming to vote? That is not the case. And you know, for every election, as I say, it has an agenda. The agenda this time will be on economy, will be on performance. If they don't get that right, I don't think
quickly, Debarl, on that one. Let's also put this in proper perspective. When you're talking about the country and the general state of the economy, you're talking about the entire collection of all the sectors. You cannot talk about the economy and then pick out on one and say Galana-Kulalu. The point is this that I want to make, Debarl. Now, if, for example, you look at the bulk of this 2 trillion that we're talking about, and we know as a country, one of the biggest problems we've had is infrastructure, roads. Right. End of story. And you cannot grow an economy without doing roads. For example,
I think I've made it
now, so if we are saying that we'll be criticizing, where did we put the money, or where is the money gone? We have to be looking at this sense that in investing this 2 trillion, where has the bulk of it gone?
Thank you.
Now, what is likely to be the effect of this amount put here in the next 5 years? And you see, if we went and picked a mini project, for example, within a whole 2 trillion, I'm talking about Galana-Kulalu, we'll be looking at a miniature within the macro.
Fantastic.
And cannot give an assessment.
When Thika Highway was being done, Super Highway was being done,
I'm sorry
it was done at 31, the effect was there.
and we were told it's a bad project.
Thank you, thank you.
Kiriuvari, we were told it's a bad project.
I totally agree. So I want
But
us to
today,
actually train our
we are
focus on what we
benefiting
came
from
to
them.
discuss today, because we'll dedicate a whole show on looking at the manifesto of Jubilee. We are discussing about the numbers, and we want to see who is leading the park in NASA and Jubilee and Independence. We want to see how.
Fine. Can I say just one thing before you get to me on the
everyone,
numbers?
if I give you that
just one. It is not. I did not talk about the debt.
I give you that chance.
You about the debt at all.
Right.
No,
Let him say one thing.
No, I never said even one thing.
Okay, the one thing.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, globally, debt is not necessarily bad. It's what you use with the debt. If you use it the way it was supposed to be used, and you did not misappropriate it, then there is nothing wrong you've done. Yeah. But I think the debate should be also debt versus looting. If most of the money that is borrowed is looted, or if most of our assets or resources are looted, and you are borrowing because you have stolen your resources, then of course that is a bad thing.
Yes.
That's what I wanted to say. So we must focus this debate within the context of what is happening in Kenya. It's not just theory. And then to correct my friend Wamatangi, today I have so many things to correct with him. There is nothing free in Kenya. Kenyans pay taxes.
Free.
So there is no free education as such. There is no free nothing. Kenyans have paid taxes for these things. So nobody is giving Kenyans freebies. Kenyans are funding them by themselves. No, so then we can go to
Miguna, you are living in Canada, and then you came back the other day. When you were in Canada, by the way, people used to pay for maternity. Children used to pay for examination fees those days.
I was in Canada because I was fighting for your freedom.
I know,
so
but that time I'm only updating you. While you are away, we used to pay. Now we are not paying.
All right, thank you.
No, Wamatangi, you are wrong.
Okay, let's get